Joe Walker here. I am in the broiler paddock, and I just moved their shelters forward. They'll be getting a brand new paddock tomorrow, so they're right at the end. But I think this is really cool. So we got some real tall forages in here, and when I see this, so these birds are obviously in this dense grass here, this tall grass for shade. But when I see that, it reminds me of what I learned a while back as far as where chickens, or the modern chicken, actually originated. And from my understanding, they were in the Asian jungles. So they were jungle fowl in Asia that we selectively bred over the years. And it wasn't until, I think, if I'm not mistaken, around the 50s that we really started selectively breeding these guys for meat consumption. And in a previous video, I talk about the problems that we've run into with selectively breeding fruit and how that has drastically increased the sugar content. And so now we have, for instance, apples that are nothing like the original apple. They're massive and have a tremendous amount of sugar. So people may ask, well, you have a problem with the selective breeding of fruit, why don't you have a problem with the selective breeding of the livestock we raise today? And the fact of the matter is that all of it is selectively bred. For instance, there are no wild birds that closely resemble these guys, you know. And but the reason I don't have an issue with the selectively bred livestock is because we haven't increased the sugar, so we haven't really changed anything other than they produce a heavier carcass and faster. So there's still protein and there's still fat. There may be more protein and more fat because it's a bigger bird, but we're only going to eat, one bird, to where in the past when we hunted, one bird wouldn't have done much for us. We'd have needed a couple of birds to get full, and now, so but we eat a whole apple. So it's not like people are just taking a small slice of that apple and eating it. They're eating typically the whole apple. So that's a tremendous amount of sugar. You're not really going to eat, you're not going to overeat on protein and fat. I mean, that's just how it is. Both of those are very satiating and will fill you up, so you're not going to get hungry and eat like 10 chickens and over consume protein and fat. But it is very easy to over consume sugar or carbohydrates, and that's why I don't necessarily have a problem with the selective breeding of livestock versus a lot of the modern produce that we eat today. Another point I'd like to bring up on selective breeding is that many people, and I actually had a comment on one of my previous videos, many people believe that these birds, the Cornish Cross, is genetically modified. Well, there's a huge difference between genetic modification and selective breeding. So these birds are not genetically modified. If you actually take it down to the definition, sure, their genetics have been modified through selective breeding, but when people reference GMOs or genetically modified organisms, that's basically using CRISPR technology to splice genes from other beings, other organisms. For instance, genetically modified corn, they take the genetics from the corn plant and splice it with a particular caterpillar gene that is resists the glyphosate. So that way they can just saturate the crops with glyphosate and essentially annihilate everything, but the corn will survive. Now the corn does absorb that glyphosate and therefore gets passed on into the kernels or whatnot, and then into the feed or food if it's for human consumption. But anyhow, that's just my thoughts on genetic modification, selective breeding, and so on and so forth. If you like what you're seeing, like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff, and we'll catch you on the next one.